Spider-Man 2 was the title that single-handedly turned Spider-Man from being a mediocre licensed game property into a full-fledged AAA gaming franchise. It pulled out all the stops to truly make players feel like they were Spider-Man, with an open world and a ludicrous degree of control over Spider-Man's web swinging, with a system that it pretty much developed from scratch. It's no surprise that most modern Spider-Man games have explicitly used Spider-Man 2 as their template, but what is surprising is that most of the games since haven't even come close to matching the original. Spider-Man 3 phoned in shitty and boring missions, Ultimate Spider-Man was a phoned-in Spider-Man campaign tacked onto what was obviously supposed to be a Venom game, and the Amazing Spider-Man games tried to update the formula with the ridiculously unreliable web rush mechanic and that stupid-ass hero menace system forcing you to stop for a pointless side mission every 3 minutes. But some fans think that one game in the series has either come close or even surpassed the original, Spider-Man Web of Shadows, and while we wait for Insomniac's Spider-Man game, or even a release date, or any kind of news, let's take a look at what some consider the series' current pinnacle. By the way, I'm reviewing the Wii version, so if the PS3 and Xbox 360 versions are different, I'd prefer a more cordial response than "Get it right, you stupid f***!" During a regular fight with Venom, the symbiote replicates itself and reattaches to Spider-Man, giving him the black suit once again. Venom escapes, and the symbiote continues replicating and spreading symbiotes and infected citizens across the city. By the time Spider-Man realizes what's going on, the symbiotes have formed a full-fledged pandemic, half the city's been turned, there's mass panic, the city is quarantined, and Spider-Man is trapped in an overrun city with little backup and no way out. I think part of why I find the game story compelling is that it's different playing a superhero game where the superhero is so helpless. Spider-Man is strong and it's loads of fun to play as him, but what's he going to do to stop an alien invasion? This isn't like the Arkham games where there's a quick and simple solution to every apocalypse. You can't do jack to proactively stop the invasion, and it creates a genuine sense of dread. You spend far more time desperately scraping to save whoever and whatever you can rather than fighting the symbiotes directly because there's nothing you can do against them. The best plan Spider-Man can conceive is to break the Tinkerer out of prison and just hope he comes up with a plan, which itself is a difficult choice that compromises Spider-Man, but even once Tinkerer starts building a symbiote bomb, nobody's particularly hopeful that it'll work, and it's still a desperate struggle to hold out long enough to build the bomb. When all's said and done, the story is nothing to write home about, but the central premise of a superhero stuck in a zombie apocalypse, so powerful and yet so powerless, is a great concept that's well executed. The web swinging is largely unchanged from previous Spider-Man games. The lone exception I can think of is that they pulled out the super jump, which was a hella fun way to navigate the city. You control every individual web swing and web zip with very intuitive controls that make navigating the city as fun and simple as it ever was. You also have all your web swinging and navigation abilities unlocked from the outset, since all the game's upgrades are geared around combat. I'd also like to point out that you swing the Wii Remote vertically to do a web swing and horizontally to perform a key attack, and the game never has difficulty reading your input or sends you accidentally doing one move when you tried to do the other. Although swinging the nunchuck vertically triggers the target lock and horizontally switches suits, and I've had the game mistake those two actions, but at least each of those is a momentary lapse that you can quickly just reverse with another flick. Unlike Spider-Man 3, where the black suit was a momentary power-up that the game actively punished you for actually using, Web of Shadows not only lets you swap between the red and black suits at will at no penalty, but each suit has its own distinct moveset and playstyle. Red suit attacks are geared largely around mobility, while black suit attacks emphasize power and wrecking shit with tendrils, but kind of sitting still while you attack. The red suit has homing flying kicks and web splatters, where the black suit has a kind of claw slashing attack and a tendril whip. Get over here! You can swap between suits at a moment's notice with a simple flick, allowing you to immediately switch playstyles and attacks anytime that you want. It's a pretty good system, even though by the end of the game the black suit starts getting massive broken area effect attacks that just knock the bitch out of an entire city block at once. The big innovation that Web of Shadows was touted for, and this is going to sound stupid, was the ability to punch people on walls or in midair. Or to be more accurately, the ability to punch people on walls or in midair and not have it suck. Let's face it, there's a reason the Amazing Spider-Man games just stole Arkham Asylum's combat system. For all their innovations, the Spider-Man games have never had good combat. You usually just land on the ground and mash an attack button. Web of Shadows not only has several attacks and combinations available for both ground, wall, and air-based combat, but it also adds the Web Strike, an attack that lets you immediately web zip to and attack an enemy. You can bounce off enemies, leap off or away from enemies to dodge counters, even pick them up and knock them around in midair for effective air juggling. The web strike not only makes aerial combat both a spectacle and super easy, but it lets you jump seamlessly between enemies and entire modes of combat in an instant. You can be attacking enemies on the ground, knock one into the air and web strike him to death, go from that to web striking nearby enemy on the wall, cling to that wall and start pounding on any nearby enemies on the wall, leap off and fight some more airborne enemies, and then come crashing down onto the ground. It's all easy and controls intuitively. I'll be the first to admit Web of Shadows' combat system has its issues. It's not particularly challenging since most enemies don't have much health, and if you're not feeling particularly imaginative, you can button mash your way through enemies and probably get away with it. I really wish they hadn't thrown in regenerating health because you're so agile that it's easy as piss to run away long enough to recover, and it's not until the last third or so of the game, where most of the levels are escort missions, that you're forced to really strategize and get creative with attacks by surgically prioritizing and eliminating enemies or wiping out large groups quickly. And yet there's just a major sense of freedom to the combat. So many viable moves available to you and so many ways to approach combat that I find exhilarating. This just feels like how Spider-Man would fight enemies, nimbly zipping between baddies, disorienting and incapacitating enemies with special moves. The speed, the energy, it's just plain fun and it all feels right. Combat is an inescapable necessity to superhero games, and this is the only Spider-Man game that's gone out of its way to replicate Spider-Man's fighting style. It's the next big step to really making players feel like they're Spider-Man that other games in the series have never really attempted. The game's camera also does a great job preventing you from getting disoriented as you swap combat styles and entire planes of combat in rapid succession, as you can see in this excerpt from the Black Cat boss fight, where we're leaping all over creation, but I can always tell what's going on thanks to the game's target lock. The one big divisive factor to Web of Shadows is that the game, for all intents and purposes, doesn't have any side quests in the sandbox. The characters that give you story missions will have side missions that it calls side quests, but they're all just variations on kill X number of enemies or carry a few civilians to the hospital. In place of side quests, the game is constantly full of wandering enemies that you can fight for an XP bonus, and most of the game's upgrades dramatically soup up your attacks, so XP is nothing to sneer at. And if you need an excuse to just explore the city, there's a shitload of spider emblems to explore for that boost your health and swing speed, which they're common enough that collecting them is actually pretty fun. This is a design aspect of the game that really varies from player to player, but personally, I'm fine with the lack of side quests. For one, the side quests in other Spider-Man games have been mediocre at best. How many of you would actually do the side quests in the other games if the game didn't grab you by the neck and force you to do them? Who actually cares about the stupid crime patrols in 3 where you punch out 5 groups of guys in a row, or the girl with the missing balloon in Spider-Man 2? An octopus doctor's trying to blow up the city! Suck it up, Buttercup! But mainly, without pointless, intrusive side quests that only exist to justify the sandbox, the story and game just flow a lot better. You never get forcefully pulled off course away from the main story to do some pointless shit. Instead, you're swinging from destination to destination, and if you want to stop and grab a few emblems or take out a few quick enemies, it's a voluntary, momentary diversion, and then you're on your way. It doesn't break the flow of the game, and the game genuinely does not give a shit how many of the missions that are present you actually complete. I'd rather the pointless side missions not exist at all than they exist, distract from the main game, and suck ass and waste my time on top of all that. The main reason that I enjoy Web of Shadows is that I find the game very immersive. I'd played through the full game 3 times prior to this review, and I still just get sucked into the game and its world every time that I play it. Navigation and combat come the closest these games have come to making you feel like you're Spider-Man the entire time you play. The combat and techniques are structured such that you feel nothing cannot be done, and the controls are dirt simple to use, putting as few barriers as possible between you and the game. But I think a lot of the immersion also comes down to the story and how it's told and paced. A full 2 hours of game time pass before the symbiote invasion even starts, and even then it's a gradual build-up before the city goes full shithole like it is in the opening. This is probably the only time I felt an in medias res actually helped a game rather than being dumb and pretentious. You help Luke Cage end a gang war, which is basically an extended tutorial, and then stop the Kingpin as he carries out massive corporate sabotage operations. It may sound like dull, tedious padding, and it stretches credulity that the 2 local gangs have about 500 plus members each, and that Kingpin spent what must have been billions on Iron Man and Green Goblin tech for each of his several hundred goons, but the slow pace and build-up served the game really well. You get acclimated to a normal bustling city and Spider-Man's normal superhero routine, and then the game pulls the rug out from under you, abruptly cutting off the Kingpin story with crazed citizens going apeshit. The rapid shift in tone and atmosphere throws you off balance because the world you've gotten used to changes in an instant. Paranoia sets in as you chase infected citizens around just wondering how deep the infection has gotten. The paranoia is personified in a fight with Wolverine, who shows up and ambushes you to see if you're the real Spider-Man, which he determines by asking you the most obscure Spider-Man trivia ever. Show of hands, who read the one Spider-Man story where a third or fourth string character died and Spider-Man and Wolverine tracked his killers to Berlin? Or follow-up, who knows who declined to join the new Avengers? I know that's not even a Spider-Man question, but the game asks it anyway. The entire game is shown from Spider-Man's perspective, so you have no clue how quick this infection has spread without your notice until you have another run-in with Venom and see him spreading it like wildfire. And just when you thought things couldn't get any worse, the perpetually and collectively useless ass of S.H.I.E.L.D. shows up. The first thing you see S.H.I.E.L.D. do is fail horrendously to contain a single superpowered being. And these dumb assholes are your only backup. The nightmare is real. There's a memorable and hectic level where you chase Electro through the city as he tears apart quarantine zones looking for his sister, hammering home the sense of panic during a pandemic, and it's all capped off with the shit just got real moment of Electro becoming possessed by a symbiote, loudly announcing that any character is fair game now. When the invasion is in full force, the city that you've spent several hours running around bustling and lively is abandoned. It's deeply unsettling seeing the environment you spent hours running around teeming with life and activity just desolated with nobody but zombies and desperate fleeing survivors on the streets. Even the music goes from a heroic beat straight out of the Sam Raimi movies to what could best be described as haunted ambiance, and the shift in tone wouldn't be so palpable without the game easing into the invasion. Almost every mission in this last third of the game is you escorting and rescuing civilians, which sounds annoying, but the game is very generous with checkpoints and giving your escort health back if you fail, so the reality of an epidemic is continually front and center. There's no glossing over how dire the situation is for civilians as things keep going from bad to worse. Again, the story is no great shakes, but it largely makes sense, and it's told in a compelling manner. I get sucked in, and I enjoy every minute of it. Well, mostly every minute. My biggest problem with the game is, ironically, also the game's biggest selling point. The game's story has a theme of living with the consequences of difficult choices, and the game is supposed to play out differently depending on whether you use the red or black suit. Key phrase there being supposed to, because this moral choice system is bungled in every way that you could imagine. I've done solid red and solid black runs through the game, and regardless of what you do, you get the exact same missions in the exact same order, strung along the exact same plot developments, conveyed by the exact same dialogue and the exact same cutscenes. The game plays out the exact same every time that you play it, apart from the ending and a brief stretch where a different person bosses you around with the same missions as normal. The game makes a point of tracking how much you use the red or black suits, but your suit alignment does nothing. It doesn't affect character interactions, it doesn't change cutscenes or how the story plays out, and it doesn't even contribute towards which ending you get. At critical points in the story, you'll get a red or black suit choice for resolving whatever situation is at hand. These choices, again, have zero impact on the game except for a tally of these choices determining the game's ending. In a classic case of how do you screw that up, even these choices are horrendously implemented. You aren't actually told what either of the choices does in any of these scenarios. You'll be fighting a boss or watching a cutscene, and then BAM! Red suit! Black suit! Choose! Choose what? What options am I picking between? There's no words! Like the first of these options pops up when Luke Cage is trying to end a gang war and the negotiations go south. The red option is to show the gangs that their war has been orchestrated, and the black option is just to let the gangs kill each other. Those options could have been fix everybody chocolate chip waffles or crack their skulls open and drink their spinal fluid for all you know. And a lot of the time you don't even have enough context for the choice to have any clue what the game's asking you. Like you're beating the shit out of symbiote Wolverine and at the end of the boss fight, bang! Red or black. What the hell is the game even asking me? Just throw up the text saying, would you like to shout words of encouragement at Wolverine or break him in half like a Kit Kat bar? And no, I am not joking about those choices. And yeah, symbiote Wolverine, it's like the wet dream of Marvel's marketing department. The boss AI is really hit or miss, to the point the normal Wolverine and Electro fights are harder than the symbiote versions later in the game. Part of the problem is the bosses are programmed to stay at one specific building, and if you play correctly, they'll be too busy frantically scrambling back to their spot to satisfy their OCD to actually fight you. Plus, the symbiote Black Cat fight is usually one of the toughest fights in the game, but then I started recording and, Cat? I'm up here, Cat. Cat? Does somebody have a laser pointer down there? Incidentally, the reason the symbiote Black Cat is usually so hard is because Mary Jane finds a shotgun lying around and decides that she's an action hero, so you have to keep running away from a royally pissed off boss to clear out the symbiote swarming her. Honey, I know you're trying to help, but this supervillain is kicking my ass and I can't babysit you, so for the love of God, woman, stop helping me! At the end of this fight is one of the central red and black suit choices of the game. Black Cat is pretty beaten up, and you have to decide whether to let S.H.I.E.L.D. take her to a hospital, or take matters into your own hands and give her a new symbiote to heal her at the cost of Mary Jane leaving you for using the black suit. This would be a really interesting and tough choice if I had any foggy idea what the game was asking me! I've had the target lock fail to cycle over specific enemies, the target lock will eventually stop working like it's going through a list and it's reached the end, and I've had the web strike, which, singles out and hits one specific enemy, home in and attacks some off-screen doof instead of the one I'm locked onto. The Wii version has framerate issues that don't disrupt the game but are nonetheless annoying, probably not helped by the map being swamped with enemies in the second half, and some of your attacks enter slow motion to show you the impacts, which can get super obnoxious with some of the higher tier attacks. And I almost wonder if the Wii version is missing files because certain cutscenes will just play in utter silence with sound effects very noticeably missing. I have not touched this footage from the end of the symbiote Wolverine fight. As a consolation prize for the performance issues and messed up sound design, the Wii version has 6 alternate costumes that aren't in the main version, and PS3 and Xbox 360 owners are still butthurt about this. Cry me a river, which I will then zip over in the spider armor suit that you don't get, bitches! Despite the huge scale and the epic stakes of the story, the final few bosses are a real letdown. Tinkerer finishes the symbiote bomb, but then symbiote Vulture swoops in and takes over the bomb, so there's an epic last-ditch battle between a group of S.H.I.E.L.D. aircraft and jetpack guys against Vulture's flying symbiotes, all while you fight Vulture in midair with nothing to swing from the airships. This is so cool! Oh, you just web strike Vulture a million times, and that's all there is to the fight. Lame! Incidentally, I love the design of the Vulture, even though I have no idea how a few blades floating in midair, very clearly not connected to anything, helps him stay airborne. How the hell does that work? The symbiote Vulture fight ends with an automatic red-black suit choice to lock you into the ending, and even the final level of the game is the same regardless of what you've done. The red suit, you detonate the bomb, kill all the symbiotes, but then have to travel to the helicarrier to stop Venom and his personal swarm. The black suit ending, you don't detonate the bomb, and then still go to the helicarrier to fight Venom.
Sure, crash the helicarrier. Suggestions?
I don't know, you could always ask S.H.I.E.L.D. They're rather effective at crashing this thing every other week. You fight through a horde of the toughest symbiotes in the game, set a few bombs to blow the helicarrier out of the sky, and just as you're about to make your escape, this huge 5-headed Venom climbs up and it just spits your bombs back out. And as you stare blankly at this thing, wondering how in the actual living hell you could possibly fight, oh, you just web strike each head 3 times and then a cutscene takes over. Final boss is far and away the easiest in the game by a huge margin. Venom dies, the helicarrier does what helicarriers do, the end. It's not hard to see why Spider-Man Web of Shadows is one of the more beloved Spider-Man games. Not being licensed on a movie meant the dev team could take their time and put out a much more well-developed product. The game is just a more cohesive whole than the rushed movie license games with one focused story and a well-developed combat system. The game has flaws, pretty glaring ones, but it does enough things well that its flaws can be forgiven. Immersion is a difficult thing to pull off. It's harder to quantify, and it's entirely subjective, but when it works, it can make for an amazing gaming experience. I really enjoy Web of Shadows, and I look forward to seeing Insomniac try to top it later this year. Or next year. Come on, guys, give us something! When, Spidey?